Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale Armortek Late Production Tiger 1. In this video, I describe the work that's been done to the model's road wheels, as well as the modifications that need to be made to them in order to get them assembled. Before I go into detail about what was performed to these wheels, quick background on the wheels themselves. This model here, since it is a late production Tiger 1, it received the all-steel wheels. The Tiger 1 was first developed, incorporated a rubber rim tire wheel, and each wheel consisted of two pieces. You had a single tired wheel and a double tired wheel. And then these wheels would be alternated throughout the interleave suspension. If we look at my initial production Tiger 1 tank that I have in my video listings, you'll see the different types of wheels that were used to assemble the suspension. Due to raw material shortages and also due to production time, that design was revised and was replaced by the steel wheel type. These wheels here are a lot easier to fabricate and are actually comprised of 4 or 5 parts. They always look like one solid wheel, and the Armortek kit features it as one solid wheel. However, the real wheel is actually consisted of 2 of these pressed metal pieces, as well as the tire itself. On the inside, you have 2 O-rings, as well as a elaborate mounting web system that the whole piece gets bolted together and sandwiches the steel tire into one unit. As complicated as that sounds, it's actually a lot easier to fabricate and to manufacture than the rubber-tired wheel. These wheels here were also the same exact wheels that were used on the King Tiger, and I believe were also used on the Panther G. In addition to being easier to manufacture, on the Tiger 1 specifically, the tank utilized less road wheels. Because of that, maintenance was not only easier to perform in the field, but also, since the parts are all interchangeable, in that the only piece that differs between the inner wheel and the outer wheel is the flange mechanism, it was also a lot easier to service and get spare parts for, as opposed to the earlier rubber rim design, which utilized more parts. As for the Armortek kit supplies you with a very nice set of wheels. They're very detailed. They are also very easy to assemble. The wheels themselves are consisted of a all CNC dish wheel, as well as a hubcap and photo etch. I'll be going over more of the details in assembling these wheels in this video. Like all German tanks fitted with the steel wheels are all each held together with fasteners. Now, on the Armortek, this is an illusion in that the wheel is all solid CNC machining, and so all the bolt details that you see here are just for detail only, are not there for any structural purposes. However, like on the real German tanks, with the steel wheel, the wheels have fasteners, and to keep the fasteners secure, they have a metal plate that is designed to grip onto the nuts here to make sure that they don't get loose and fall apart while the tank is in motion. This is a nice feature, and Armortek supplied you with this feature separate from the wheel, which is unique for a model tank, in that all model tanks out there have these pieces molded in. The strap here is made out of photo etch, and it's all brass and is a very nice feature. Now, a common mistake that a lot of people do on their Armorteks is that when they secure the plate, they have it just like that in a nice flat spot and they just mount the fasteners over it. The point of these little tabs here, though, is so that you're supposed to bend them upward, and once they're mounted, they go ahead and secure the fasteners like such. It's a nice little detail element to add to the road wheel, and is one that's definitely appreciated once it's finished. To add little bends, all you need is a pair of needle nose pliers, and you just bend the 2 little tabs upward, almost like a skateboard, And once the tabs are bent upward, you can then affix the fasteners to the wheel as such. After you take the skateboard bended up plate and you fit it to the road wheel, the fasteners, make sure they're nice and tightly bolted on, will go ahead and flatten the plate out slightly. This is okay because if you notice that still little bend that's in the end, this is enough for you to use your plier to go ahead and bend it around the fastener. You simply grab the little brass and the nut, and you twist it and bend it in. Do the same thing to the opposite side, and you're done. Repeat this exact step for every single wheel that receives the bolt strip on the tank. Now, ArmorTech gave you only enough of these bolt strips to equip only the road wheels that are on the exterior portion of the vehicle, namely the part of the vehicle where the road wheels are seen. So you don't have to do it to every single road wheel, only the ones that are visible. Once the wheels are painted, they are ready for assembly. If we notice that the inside here of the wheels have been plugged up with paper, this is to prevent any paint to get into this little gap over here for the bushings or the bearings. By not having the paint get into this area, only the primer, the bearings will slip into the slot a lot easier. Now, this being the outer wheel, you could tell because it has the extender mounted to the rear plate here of the wheel. If we notice, the extender is mounted to the rear portion of the wheel and then it is painted. Some people like to paint them in pieces. I like to install this piece to the wheel and paint it all in one shot. Now, the reason why I don't have the whole wheel assembled for painting is because once it's together like this, you're going to have a hard time getting into all the nooks and crannies on the inside here of the wheel with both the primer and the base coat. However, when it's in sections like this, it's a lot easier to get access to all of the small little spaces that are present on these wheels. Also, as I've noted, it's very important and crucial to use Loctite on all the fasteners for the wheel assembly. This is because, for obvious reasons, you don't want your wheels falling apart on you while the tank is in motion. Once the wheels are installed onto the model, it becomes a lot more difficult to take them off and to make sure everything's nice and tight. So during the construction, it is crucial to go ahead and have Loctite on the fasteners and have the fasteners fastened to the wheels in a nice, tight, secure manner. The previous builder did do just that. He did a fantastic job with making sure that these pieces are nice and tight and that they were thoroughly Loctited to the fasteners that we have here. In fact, he did such a good job that on the front plate here, when I had to remove these fasteners here, they were on so well that I was unable to take off the fasteners, and I actually had to use a Dremel to destroy the fasteners and replace them with new ones. Luckily for the fasteners that hold the two wheels together, they were not as difficult to remove. However, were more than adequate for securing the wheel to for securing the wheels together, as the Loctite or the thread lock that I used was very good. Now, as of note, while we're on the fasteners, both the inner wheel and the outer wheel use two different type of fasteners, and because of that, it is very good to label everything, especially if you're doing a rebuild like I am here. You don't want to get these two fasteners confused while you're go ahead and removing everything, as there's a lot of fasteners and it's easy to mix the two up. The main difference between the inner and the outer is that the outer wheel here, to secure the outer plate, uses Allen screws, while the inner wheel uses regular pan head slot screws. The reason for this is simple. The reason why they went ahead and used the Allen bolts for the outer wheel is because once the wheels are together, it is easier to fit in an Allen wrench to get to the fastener as opposed to a large slot screw or a slot screwdriver, which you'll see when I assemble this wheel. In addition of not mixing up the fasteners, it's also good to mix up the two end caps. These are the two end caps of the road wheels. If we notice, one's shallower than the other. This cap here is for the outer wheel. this one, while this cap here with the extended jacket on it is for the inner road wheel, which we'll see as I progress on the wheels. Also, if we notice, they are in three separate segments. These small little slits that we have here are actually CNC'd into the aluminum turning, however, are not all the way through. It's just a small little indentation. A simple fix that also helps improve accuracy and the look of the model is to go ahead either with a scroll saw or with even a coping saw or a small backhand saw, and you just go ahead and hollow out the little segments. Since the CNC has a little indentation there, it makes the blade going through the piece a lot easier, and you won't have a chance of deviating or going off course. Do this modification to both of the end caps for a really realistic look. Before I can start on the construction, you're going to need to remove some paint that builds up along the areas here where the wheels plug together. The tolerances on these parts are so tight that once the wheels are painted, they will have a little difficulty in fitting together, which, why doing this next step here, will really aid in construction. First, I'm going to remove the paint here around the rim. For that, I'm just going to use a regular slot screwdriver. You don't have to go too crazy. You just lightly rub the screwdriver on the surface, and the excess paint will be removed. Now, you don't have to have a polished surface. Just have enough paint off of the piece so that the piece fits. If we notice there's still some primer left behind, that's perfectly okay. As you can see now, the piece is now clean. It is at this time where I could go ahead and install the bearings right here. I simply just slip it in to its necessary location as such. Sometimes it might be a little stick because of the paint. If that happens, you could just use a rubber mallet and with a dowel rod that's the same diameter of the bearing, which will help seat it in properly. Once the bearings are all done, you need to go ahead and remove the paint from this area here of both sides of the road wheel. The area you really want to focus on is the edge and also the bottom plate here. And again, you just use your screwdriver and you just go ahead and you extract the paint that's on the part. Like so. You can see the paint has been thoroughly removed from the edge. Do the same thing to the reverse side. Always blow away any fragments that are left so that you're left with a nice, smooth, clean piece. Now it is time to start installing the wheels together. I take my fastener. Now at this point now is where I start installing the thread lock. For the thread lock, I like to use this Permatex paste type. It's very good. It's very affordable. I think I got this for about like $10 from a local auto store. And this is the high strength version, which I've used before, and it's pretty good. Now this version is different than the regular tube type that you have here, where it's more runnier. I find I like the paste better in that it stays on the threads and it doesn't drip all over the place in case the bottle gets knocked over. Now, to put it on, I just squeeze just a little bit out and I put a little bit on the threads. You don't want a whole lot. You just want enough just to cover some of the threads. Now, if you see there's a big glob on there, I'm just going to quickly loop my finger. Just go ahead and get that into between the threads where it belongs. You don't want to have an excess amount of Loctite gooped around your fastener because it'll tend to hurt the look of the model. Now, to line it up, the holes are not symmetrical. There's actually a certain pattern that all the wheels have. All the wheels are interchangeable, however, they need to lock on a certain way. Now, the way I like to install these wheels is I find the one segment right here. If we notice, this one hole is isolated, and then it's surrounded by a group of 2 holes on each side. You want to go ahead and find the corresponding holes that line up on the row wheel here. As you can see here, it is a single with the 2 pairs. Now, if we notice, this is the back part of the wheel. I have to say this because it's very easy when you're going through these wheels to kind of get complacent, and you'll install the wheel with the back plate on, and it'll be in reverse. It'll be anticlimactic, especially after all the time you have to go and redo all the fasteners that you see here. So be sure to stay on the ball and to get the proper side up. Just you have to orientate yourself like I just did. I slide the bolt through the flange, line it up with the corresponding wheel, seat that on. If you notice, it fits on nice and flush, just like the way it was intended. Once this is on, before you put on the fastener, you need to go ahead and put on the end cap. Again, just like before, you need to find the spot that lines up with the 2 road wheels, like so. You just make sure you just line that up and slide it in nice and straight so it doesn't go in canted. If it does, it'll hit the side and you'll have to pop the wheel apart to reinstall it properly. It snaps on, and now the holes are all lined up and it's ready to be bolted together. I just take my little nut here and I simply just thread it on. Now, you don't want to go ahead and tighten it at this point. This is the point now. You just want to get the nut onto the threads. Is at this point now when you will go ahead and start putting on the rest of the fasteners. Again, follow the same format. Take a little bit of thread lock, smear a little bit on the threads, and this time I'll go ahead and I put it on the bottom. You want to go in a plus type star format, in that when you do that, all of the bolts get put on sequentially and will all evenly grip onto the wheel at one time. If you go ahead and start from around, like in a circular motion, what's going to happen is that you're going to, especially, this is actually specifically true for tightening, is that the pieces will want to tighten in this type of way here. And it'll be kind of, it'll be a little bit off. It'll kind of throw the alignment off. If you go ahead and tighten the pieces in a star format, and you go from the acrosses, it will secure everything nice and equally, and you'll have a nice smooth finish, and you'll have the alignment true as it's supposed to be. Because at this point now, you can go ahead and start threading on the fasteners until the fasteners are all threaded on, which will look something like this. Here we have now all the fasteners temporarily mounted to the wheel. Just like I mentioned before, the nuts are just simply threaded on, but they're not tightened. To tighten them, you'll need a socket with the M2.5 head that is the same size of the fastener, and you will also need an Allen wrench. The Allen wrench simply goes inside the wheel, holds it from the inside, and then on the outside you just go ahead and you tighten it. Like I mentioned, when you tighten these wheels, you always work in a star type pattern. So you tighten everything in a nice equal type setup, which will help the alignment stay nice and true. And here's the completed outer row wheel, and this one's ready for the next step. Once the outer wheels are complete, it is then time to assemble the inner wheel. The inner wheel is very similar to its breakdown as the outer wheel. The only difference is that instead of the outer wheel, how it had that really long shaft, that flange piece that the 2 wheels bolt to, the inner wheel features a small little donut in comparison. The way the piece works is that the donut simply sandwiches the 2 wheels together, and that, once everything is all fastened together, gives you the correct thickness for the inner wheel. Now, if we notice, unlike the outer wheel, which I went ahead and painted the center shaft with the base coat, on the inner wheel I left it with the primer gray. This is because this part here is practically impossible to see once it is installed on the vehicle. So go ahead and adding the base coat to that really isn't needed. However, for the outer wheel, since that piece is visible, the base coat is necessary. Because the donut here is left in its primer gray and doesn't have any base coat on it, I don't have to remove any paint from the wheels like I did on the outer wheel. I could then insert in the bearing, and this wheel now is going to be ready for its sandwiching. Now, because the end cap does have paint on it, I will have to remove the paint from this portion here of the end cap, as well as the inner portion here of the wheel. To do that, I use the screwdriver that I used before, and I simply just scrape it on the inside. Do the same thing for the flange. Another part that makes this wheel different from the outer wheel is the fact that it uses less fasteners. Because of the design of the outer wheel with the double flange system, you need 2 sets of fasteners to bolt each wheel to the center flange. Since this wheel is shorter in size, the design requires only 1 bolt to hold the entire thing together, which makes it somewhat easier to put together. However, the procedure is still the same. After you go ahead and position all of the fasteners around the hub, tighten the fasteners again using the same cross star pattern method that I recommended earlier. Once that's complete, the road wheel will be then ready for the next step. After the wheels are all assembled, it's then time for the next step. Now, one little piece of detail that is not present on the Armortek kit and is also not really known about by a lot of people is that the bolts around the hub on these late war German tanks feature intersecting fasteners. What is meant by this is that the fasteners that are used to secure the wheel to the hub are hex bolts. However, the hex bolts alternate in that you have the hex bolt head on the reverse side of the wheel with the nut facing you, and then the next nut will be inversed in that the hex bolt head will be exposed and the nut would actually be on the reverse. This isn't done on the Armortek kit because, keep in mind, we use pan flathead screws as well as socket screws for the outer wheels. I was having trouble finding fasteners, hex head fasteners at this size, so I had to come up with a way to simulate the appearance. And the way to do that is you need to transform the nut on this end here into a hex bolt head. The way to do that is as follows. With a magic marker, you will go ahead and mark the fasteners that need to have the modification made to them. Typically, they're all uniformed in this same format, in that on the outer edges you have the hex head or the nut head, and the center you also have a nut head, while on the second and the last 2 fasteners here will be the bolt head. Once all the pieces are marked with a magic marker, it is then time to start grinding away a little bit of the surface with a Dremel with a cutting stone. The purpose of that is to remove a little bit of material off of the nut, as well as a little bit of material off of the fastener itself. This is so it removes any type of Loctite or any type of thread lock you might have on there, which will make it easy to apply the solder to cover up the fastener to make it look like a hex bolt. With the Dremel on, you simply just grind away the ones that need it. You'll see that I didn't remove too much material, just enough to scuff up the nut and also to scuff up a little bit of the fastener underneath. Once the pieces have been scuffed up, I then apply a small drop of soldering flux to each of the fasteners. You don't want a whole lot, just a little dab should do ya. After the flux is applied, it is then time to apply the solder. For applying the solder, I'm using 6040 electrical solder with a soldering iron, and I simply just put some solder onto the head and apply it on. Now, depending on how good you grind down the fastener, depends how good the solder will stick to it. Sometimes there might be a small little divot for where the fastener is, and it might take a couple passes with the soldering iron to go ahead and plug it up. Once the solder dries or cools down, you will be left with the nut, which will have the resemblance of a bolt head. You could do this to every one of the fasteners that this is required for. The procedure itself is quick and simple and is very affordable. You don't have to run out and buy a boatload of fasteners if you could find the ones this size. And here's the completed wheel with all the fasteners with their modifications made to them. Now, if you apply the procedure and there's a little bit of a dome that's a little too much for what you're looking for, it's a simple fix. Just take the Dremel with the cutting stone and just buff away and remove the amount of material required enough to get the look that is desired. Another thing that procedure does is that the soldered fastener acts as a thread lock and will prevent the fastener from ever getting loose throughout the life of the vehicle. Perform the same procedure with the outer wheel. Now, with the outer wheel, it's a little bit easier to do in that the heads of the fasteners protrude more from the fastener than on the inner wheel, which should make trimming the pieces a lot easier. Before installation, I'm going to go ahead and wash off all of the flux that is in the area. You must remove the flux in that once the paint starts getting put on, the flux can cause issues with the paint. Depending on the type of flux you use, depends on what you're going to use to wash it off. For the type of flux that I use, this flux here is turpentine soluble. However, I have seen others on the market that are water soluble. Now that all the modifications of the wheel are complete, they will be soon installed to the vehicle. The only modification that needs to be added now will be to the cap that threads onto this little fitting here. There's two little details that need to be added to that, and I will be going over those details in a future video. And with that concludes this project update video for this 1/6 scale Armortek late production Tiger 1. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook. And don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 scale tank builds, as well as other 1/6 scale detail components. Thank you.